A satisfactory morning at Highgrove begins with silence. The corridors hold warmth from the night before. Stone walls breathe out heat slowly, as if the house itself is exhaling. Groundskeepers rake gravel outside, the scratching barely reaching the upper floors. Charles moves through his private study in soft shoes, the way he has moved through mornings for decades. The rhythm never changes. Tea first, then correspondence, then the schedule. His cup sits on a mahogany side table, steam curling upward into still air. The room smells of lavender and old leather, and something faintly metallic, like ink left too long in an open well. Morning light falls across the carpet in pale slats, touching the edge of his desk. On that desk sits a manila envelope. It is thick. The paper is stiff government-grade stock, sealed with wax pressed flat by careful hands. The cover reads 3 words in clean black type: Advisory Access Audit. No sender name appears beneath them. No departmental crest. No date stamp. Just those 3 words, centred on the page, waiting for the only pair of eyes authorised to read what is inside. William sent it. Not through a courier service, not through the usual palace channels, through a private line between father and son that bypasses every layer of household staff. That single choice tells Charles more than the cover page does. Whatever lives inside this envelope, William trusted no one else to carry it. The heir to the throne chose secrecy over protocol, and that decision carries its own warning. Here is what matters in the first minute of this story. Someone close to the crown has documented what Camilla's advisory circle has been doing behind closed doors. Someone has organised names and dates and patterns into a formal audit. Someone sealed it for the king's eyes alone. The question now is whether Charles will break that seal. He picks up the envelope. He holds it with both hands. His thumbs press into the paper, feeling the bulk of the pages inside. Then he turns it over and slides one thumb beneath the wax. The seal cracks with a sound like a knuckle popping. A sharp snap in a silent room. Charles pulls 3 stapled documents from inside and lays them flat on his desk. The first page is a summary. It lists 7 names, 14 months of activity, and a pattern that stops the king mid-reach for his teacup. For over a year, a parallel advisory structure has operated inside the palace. Briefings prepared for Charles have been intercepted, edited, repackaged. Key decisions about public engagements and constitutional matters have passed through unauthorised hands. People Charles barely recognises have shaped what he reads each morning before he reads it. His daily schedule, his charitable priorities, his constitutional correspondence, all of it touched by hands he never approved. The briefings were filtered. The decisions were shaped. The king was managed. The palace credential, a laminated pass that separates those who advise the king from those who do not. It has been handed to people who serve Camilla before they serve the crown. Charles reads the first page once, then he reads it again. His jaw tightens, muscles working beneath the skin of his temples. The tea beside him cools, untouched. A brown ring forms on its surface like a slow clock marking wasted time. He flips to the second page. 7 names in alphabetical order. 7 advisors with daily access to his schedule, his correspondence, his private calendar. 4 came in at Camilla's direct recommendation. 3 have never briefed Charles face to face. Not once. Not in 14 months. 3 people with authorised access to the king's working life who have never sat across a table from the king himself. They brief her. She synthesises. She presents. And somewhere in that chain, information bends, not breaks, bends. The facts arrive, but the emphasis shifts. A health briefing loses its urgency. A scheduling conflict vanishes. A request from William's office gets buried 3 pages deep in a summary that Charles skims over breakfast. Nothing is missing. Everything is present. But the order in which it arrives determines how the king responds. Control does not require lying. It only requires choosing which truths arrive first. Charles closes the folder and stands. His chair scrapes against hardwood, a jagged sound in the quiet room. He walks to the tall window and presses his palm flat against cold glass. Below, the gardens stretch out in perfect symmetry, every hedge clipped, every path swept, every flower shaped by someone else's hand. He pulls his hand away. Our palm print remains on the glass, slowly fading. Then he calls for his chief of staff. The man arrives in under 5 minutes. Pressed navy suit, quiet tie, polished shoes that click on stone. He carries a leather portfolio under one arm and expects a routine question about the afternoon. What he receives instead is a folder slid across the desk with one finger. "Read this," Charles tells him. The chief of staff opens the folder. His eyes move across the first page. They reach the midpoint and stop. He looks up at the king, and Charles watches something familiar cross the man's face. The flicker of calculation, the micro-expression of a man deciding how much truth to release. His fingers tighten slightly on the edge of the folder. His weight shifts to his back foot, as if bracing for what comes next. Charles does not give him time to calculate. He asks one question: how long? The chief of staff's shoulders drop, not dramatically, half an inch, just enough. The answer comes in a voice stripped of its usual steadiness. At least 14 months, possibly longer. It began as informal convenience. Camilla's team would pre-summarize certain documents before they reached Charles. A time-saving gesture. A kindness offered and accepted. Nobody questioned it at first. Nobody questioned it at all. But kindness does not explain why 3 credentialed advisors have never once entered the king's briefing room. Charles absorbs the answer without moving. His hands stay flat on the desk. His breathing stays even. But the muscle along his jawline twitches once. Then again. A small rebellion of the body against the composure of the man. He asks a second question. Who authorised their credentials? Silence fills the room, the way water fills a glass. Rising slowly, pressing against the edges, Charles repeats the question. His voice does not rise. It drops. The answer confirms what the report suggests. Credentials were routed through a channel managed by Camilla's private secretary. Nothing forged, nothing technically illegal, simply processed without the king's direct approval. A bureaucratic sleight of hand that looks clean on paper and smells wrong in person. The kind of manoeuvre that survives by never being examined too closely. Now Charles pushes further. He demands a full accounting. Every advisor with active palace access, who reports to Camilla directly or through her office. Names, appointment dates, a log of every briefing attended and every briefing skipped. He wants the entire architecture laid open on his desk by morning. The chief of staff nods once. He closes the folder, tucks it beneath his arm, and leaves. His footsteps fade down the long corridor, each one slightly faster than the last. Charles sits alone in a room that feels like what it has always been. An office where someone else held the pen. This is the turn, because until this moment the problem seemed containable. A few misrouted documents, some advisors with blurred loyalties. Annoying, but manageable. The full accounting will destroy that comfort. Camilla's team has not improvised a workaround. They have built architecture. A second information pipeline runs inside the palace, alongside the official channel. It decides what Charles sees. It decides what he misses. It decides when. A king who does not control his own information does not control his own kingdom. That is the fracture line, and it makes everything that follows irreversible. But Camilla does not wait for the ground to settle. She discovers the report within 48 hours. How she learns of it matters less than how fast she moves. She acts before Charles can. She contacts allies embedded deep in the household staff. She builds a counter-narrative with the precision of someone who has run palace politics for 20 years. Every phone call is deliberate. Every conversation is shaped to plant the same seed. The report, she argues, is not an audit. It is a weapon. William assembled it from personal resentment. This is a son undermining his stepmother, a jealous heir trying to weaken the queen consort before his own reign begins. The evidence is cherry-picked. The framing is hostile. And if Charles acts on it, he becomes William's instrument, dancing on his son's strings. The argument lands with force. It carries the weight of genuine history. The tension between William and Camilla stretches across decades. Every tabloid cover, every cold public greeting, every careful distance maintained at state dinners, the stiff smiles, the turned shoulders, the silences that lasted entire car rides. Camilla's allies know how to weaponize that record. They press one sharp idea into every conversation they can reach. This is not about governance. This is about grudges. A king should never let family bitterness dictate palace operations. For 2 full days, the strategy holds. Charles pauses. He wavers. He nearly puts the folder away for good. The logic is persuasive. William does resent Camilla. The history is not invented. Maybe the heir's judgment is clouded by something older and more personal than governance. Maybe the audit sees conspiracy where there is only convenience. Maybe a son's wound is not a reliable lens for evaluating a queen's behaviour. Charles sets the report aside. He appears at a public engagement with Camilla beside him. Cameras capture them walking together, composed, smiling. Behind the scenes, the audit sits closed on his desk, gathering the faintest film of dust. Palace corridors hum with quiet reassurance. The advisors will keep their posts. The structure will survive. The queen consort's position remains untouched. Camilla's people believe the crisis has passed. They lower their guard. They exhale. They stop watching for the document that will end them. But the full accounting is still coming. It arrives on the 3rd morning in a plain binder. The chief of staff sets it on the desk without commentary. Charles opens it alone, after the door clicks shut behind his departing aide. The room is quiet enough to hear the clock on the mantel. The binder smells of fresh toner and the metallic edge of new staples. The numbers inside are simple. The pattern they form is not. Every advisor Camilla recommended shows the same behaviour. Access to the king's documents. No direct briefings with the king. Every paper they touched was routed through Camilla's office before reaching Charles. The palace's own records confirm the structure, not William's characterisation of it. The raw, time-stamped, internally generated logs that no one can call a vendetta. The audit is not a son's interpretation. It is a photograph of a structure that exists in the palace's own files. Camilla's counter-narrative attacks the photographer. It says nothing about what the photograph shows. Charles sits with the binder open on his desk. He reads it through once, then again. On the second reading, something shifts behind his eyes. The doubt lifts like fog burning off a field at dawn. The hesitation drains away like water finding a crack in old stone. His posture changes. His chin rises half an inch. The king's body decides before the king's mouth speaks a word. He retrieves William's folder from the drawer where he buried it 2 days ago. He opens it beneath the warm circle of his desk lamp. This time he holds a red pen. He moves through every name on the list slowly, running his finger beneath each entry. He cross-references each one against the accounting. He pauses at one name, draws a tight circle around it, then another name, another circle, pressed harder, then a third. 3 names circled on the page. The red ink presses deep enough to score the paper beneath. 3 people who carried the palace credential, a laminated pass that separates those who advise the king from those who do not. They use that access to serve an agenda the king never authorised. Charles sets the pen down. He closes both folders and sits in the silence for a long time. The house settles around him. A pipe ticks somewhere deep in the wall. Outside, the afternoon light turns gold against the stone. The next morning, Charles signs the revocation order. The time is 11 minutes past 9 on a Tuesday. The pen is a fountain pen, heavy, black ink that demands pressure and patience. His signature lands steady on the line. No tremor, no second stroke, just a name, and a world rearranged beneath it. The order reaches palace security before noon. By early afternoon, 3 advisors receive individual visits. Each conversation follows the same template: brief, professional, final. Palace access revoked effective immediately. Credentials to be surrendered before leaving the grounds. The first advisor surrenders the pass in silence. The second asks why. The third refuses to leave. Voices rise in a corridor near the east wing, bouncing off stone walls and the high vaulted ceiling. A security officer moves closer, his shoes clicking on the floor in a measured rhythm. The argument folds. The advisor's voice drops. The final credential slides across a desk with the reluctant weight of something being given up forever. By 2 in the afternoon, 3 credentials sit in a security office, deactivated, stacked. The laminates still warm from the pockets that carried them all morning. 3 plastic rectangles no larger than a playing card, small enough to forget they exist until the moment they are taken away. Charles sits at the head of a briefing table with 3 empty chairs around it. This is what victory costs a king. He has cut the parallel structure loose. He has removed the filter standing between himself and his own decisions. But that filter also served as a buffer. Those advisors, divided loyalties and all, carried work. They read documents so he did not have to read every word. They organised his calendar so he could focus on governing. They handled the details that pile up invisibly until someone stops handling them. Briefings that once arrived, digested, now arrive raw. Summaries no one writes must now be written by the king himself. Documents that came condensed now come whole. The schedule someone else managed now belongs to the king alone. Every phone call, every memo, every request for time now lands directly in his hands without a net beneath it. You do not fire the people who carry your weight without feeling every pound of it land on your own back. The days that follow grow longer. His study lamp burns past 10, past 11, past midnight. Reading stacks rise on the corners of his desk like small towers of unfinished obligation. The paperwork does not care whether the king is tired. The corridors of Highgrove, once humming with managed efficiency, now carry a different silence. Not peace, responsibility, the heavy, necessary quiet of a man doing his own work for the first time in years. And then one last detail surfaces weeks later. One of the 3 revoked advisors had been feeding information to media contacts, not in any dramatic fashion, no secret handoffs in parking garages, something far quieter, a steady drip of scheduling details, internal disagreements, and private health updates, small enough to deny, frequent enough to sustain a relationship with a journalist who knew when to call and what to ask. The advisor never consciously set out to cause real damage. The leaks were transactional, a favour here, a timeline there. The oldest currency in palace life, traded the way it has always been traded, but currency spent in someone else's name is still a debt charged against the crown. And the crown, it turns out, keeps a longer ledger than anyone expected. Charles has always understood this arithmetic. What changed is not his knowledge, it is his tolerance. He held the proof in both hands and decided that knowing without acting is just another form of permission. The problem was never convenience. It was never kindness. It was control. The palace credential, a laminated pass that separates those who advise the king from those who do not. It rests in a security drawer now, 3 of them stacked and deactivated. Outside the gate, Camilla's senior advisor pauses beside the guardhouse. A hand reaches into a jacket pocket and places the last laminated pass on the security desk. The officer accepts it without a word. The advisor turns toward a waiting car. Inside the palace, the briefing room door swings shut. The latch catches with a soft click. 3 chairs sit empty.